Skyrim is a world where something is almost always happening. Dragons attack cities, bandits ambush roads, caves hide monsters, and even the quietest towns usually have some kind of story waiting beneath the surface. But strangely, there are a few places in Skyrim where absolutely nothing happens. No major quests, no important NPCs, no huge battles or hidden secrets waiting to be uncovered. Just empty stretches of the world that feels forgotten, overlooked, or strangely disconnected from everything around them. And that's what makes it so interesting, because in a game filled with constant danger and discovery, finding a place where the world suddenly goes quiet can almost feel unnatural. Like you're stepping into an area Skyrim itself barely remembers exists. Skyrim is filled with people, hundreds of them. Farmers, guards, innkeepers, mages, bandits, children who yell at you like you stole their lunch money. Each one of them exists for a reason, or at least they try to. Some give you quests, some sell you potions, some dramatically die in front of you to prove that this dungeon means business. And then there's Snorid, a man so unremarkable, so untouched by questlines, so entirely devoid of purpose, that he accidentally becomes one of the most fascinating NPCs in the game. Snorid doesn't roam the roads of Skyrim. He doesn't stand out in the wilderness, waiting for players to stumble across him like some forgotten side character in a B plot that never got written. He lives in solitude. More specifically, he sleeps in the East Empire Company warehouse, a restricted access zone you're not supposed to enter unless you're on official business, which you probably aren't. And that's fitting, because Snorid doesn't want to be seen. You'll find him curled up on a bedroll, tucked away among crates and clutter. He doesn't patrol, he doesn't eat, doesn't work, he just sleeps, and sleeps, and sleeps. Like a man trying to speedrun through life with the fast travel button permanently held down. The only time he ever gets up is if he's attacked, at which point he'll fight back, briefly, then return to unconsciousness, metaphorically and probably literally. And if you do try to talk to him, he gives you the warm, friendly greeting of,
"You're not supposed to be in here."
That's it? That's the extent of Snorid's engagement with the world. Here's the thing. Almost every other NPC in Skyrim is part of a machine, a radiant system, a faction quest, a city's ecosystem. They fit in the game's design like gears in a clock. Snorid is like a marble in a blender. He doesn't move, he doesn't connect to the world in any real way. If you removed him from the game, I bet 99.9% of players would never even notice. He's not a character, he's the absence of one, which is weirdly bold when you think about it. In a game about shouting dragons out of the sky and becoming the champion of 16 different gods, Snorid is just trying to get through the day. He's like an anti-hero, but not in the edgy, morally grey way. More like an anti-entity, if that makes any sense at all. He defies narrative, and maybe, just maybe, that's the narrative Bethesda were going for. Okay, so maybe he's just a dock worker, right? He's in a warehouse, maybe he's off shift. Nope. Snorid has no job routines at all. No AI packages for hauling crates or clocking in at the East Empire Company. He's not listed in the employee registry in any meaningful way beyond existing. You don't see him hauling anything. He never interacts with anyone. There are NPCs in the warehouse who do go about their business. Snorid is not one of them. He has a job title, technically. Technically, he's a Nord employee, but that's about it. He is, in the most literal sense, an employee who has never worked a day in his life. He has no dialogue trees, no duties, no story hooks, no ambitions. Snorid is not a participant in Skyrim's economy. He is a bystander in its sleep cycle. But again, he has a name, and in Skyrim, a name actually means something. Right? Let's do a lore check. Open the wikis, comb through the UESP, look at game files, try to find a journal, a letter, a passing reference in someone else's quest. Anything to tell us about Snorid. Well, if you happen to do that, you won't find anything at all. There's no backstory, no implication of a backstory, No hints that a backstory might have once been drafted and then deleted. Snorid exists without context. He's not mentioned by any other NPC, he doesn't write, doesn't speak, doesn't appear to age, he just is. In a city filled with corruption, military tension, and royal politics, Snorid is none of it. He is the most background character imaginable, which somehow makes him stand out even more. Let's give Bethesda some credit. What if Snorid is deliberate? What if he's meant to represent something? A developer joke? An artistic metaphor? A weird social experiment to see how many people would sneak into a restricted area and find a man taking a decades-long nap? There's something almost performance art about it. You have hundreds of characters fighting and yelling and dying to give the game its drama and texture, and then one guy who's just sleeping on the job. He doesn't need your help, he doesn't want your attention, he doesn't want to be awake. He is the silent witness to a world in motion. Skyrim is tearing itself apart, literally, and Snorid's just hoping it'll quiet down before his next REM cycle. Honestly, he might be the smartest one in the whole province. Here's what's wild. Despite doing nothing at all, Snorid has a small but devoted fan base. You'll find posts about him on forums. Who is this guy in the warehouse? Why is there a Nord just sleeping in solitude? What's the whole point of Snorid? Some players even roleplay explanations for him. He's a smuggler in hiding, he's cursed to sleep forever, he's the last honest worker in the East Empire Company. Snorid is a canvas, a void you can probably project meaning onto. Because that's the thing. In a game where everything is designed to pull your attention, a character who asks for none of it becomes oddly magnetic. He's not trying to impress you, he's just here, like a box or a barrel or a goat that wandered indoors and nobody wants to deal with. Snorid is part of the world, not part of your story. And that is what makes him unforgettable. Let's zoom out. Snorid is, in many ways, a weird commentary on NPCs themselves. What does it mean to be a character in a world built entirely around the player? If every other NPC exists for you, to teach you something, to fight you, to quest with you, then Snorid's refusal to participate is almost revolutionary. He's not broken, he's resistant. He's the first NPC who's looked at the player, shrugged and said, "Nah, I'm good." Maybe he knows he's in the game, maybe he's achieved a higher level of awareness. He's the NPC who realised the futility of it all. While others chase glory, fame, dragon-slaying titles, and enchanted swords, Snorid has reached enlightenment. He is free. Or, maybe someone just forgot to delete him during development, but let me dream, I don't know. Let's be honest, not all of us are the Dragonborn. Most of us are, Snorid. We stay in bed longer than we should, we try not to attract attention, we have no grand quest. You don't shout people off mountains or become head of the East Empire Company in a week. We just exist, watching things happen around us, occasionally wondering if you're supposed to do something else, rather than watch a video about a Skyrim NPC who does nothing at all. Snorid is the mirror we rarely want to look into. He's what happens when a game built on power fantasies leaves a crack open for ordinary silence. And somehow, the silence is louder than any dragon shout. He doesn't fight the world, he endures it. Quietly and alone. Maybe that's depressing, but maybe it's really not. Maybe it's a kind of comfort. Because if Snorid can find peace in just sleeping in a drafty warehouse, maybe we all can as well. Snorid is an NPC who does nothing. Not metaphorically, not hyperbolically. Literally nothing. No quests, no fights, no purpose, and no arc. And yet, he stays in your mind. Because in a world full of distractions, Snorid offers stillness. In a province that demands your attention, he gives you nothing to look at. And somehow that makes you stare even harder. In a game that begs you to be the hero, Snorid is a man who never asks you to be anything. And maybe he was a mistake. A leftover asset, an unsigned dialogue tree that wandered into the warehouse and never left. Or maybe, just maybe, he's Skyrim's quietest masterpiece. The only NPC in all of Skyrim that does nothing. And somehow that means, quite literally, everything. Skyrim is a game that thrives on chaos. Dragons descend from the sky to attack unsuspecting villagers, bandits demand your money or your life, and vampires can turn even the safest city into a blood-soaked nightmare. Every road leads to an adventure, and every cave promises danger, treasure, or both. Yet in this sprawling living world, there is one place that defies the very nature of Skyrim. One location where nothing happens at all. A place forgotten by the game itself. That place is known to be Stendarr's Beacon. Why is it that this lonely outpost, perched on the southeastern edge of the map, might just be the most intriguing place in all of Skyrim? When you first stumble upon Stendarr's Beacon, you might think it's like any other location in Skyrim. After all, the game conditions us to expect something, anything when we enter a new area. Maybe there's a quest here, a hidden treasure, a secret boss. Skyrim loves to reward exploration, so surely something is waiting at the top of this hill. But as you approach, the realization dawns, there's nothing here. Stendarr's Beacon is an outpost for the Vigilants of Stendarr, a faction devoted to hunting down Daedra and those who consort with them. But unlike other faction locations in Skyrim, the College of Winterhold, the Thieves Guild, or the Dawn Guard, this place serves no real function. You can't join the Vigilants, they don't give you quests, and aside from a handful of NPCs pacing around and mumbling about Stendarr's mercy, there's almost no reason to be here. Even when you do encounter the Vigilants elsewhere in the game, they don't talk about Stendarr's Beacon at all. It's almost like Bethesda put it in the game and then forgot about it. Which raises the question, why does it even exist at all? To understand the emptiness of Stendarr's Beacon, we need to talk about the Vigilants of Stendarr. On paper, they seem like a faction that should be important. Their whole thing is fighting Daedra, which in-game, literally called the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, sounds like it should matter. But it doesn't. The Vigilants exist as a cautionary tale, a group of self-righteous zealots who vastly overestimate their own strength. Their reliance on simple weapons, robes, and faith makes them laughably weak against any major threat. They claim to be Skyrim's protectors, but they get absolutely annihilated the second a real Daedric threat appears. This is made painfully clear when you start the Dawn Guard DLC. The very first thing you learn, the Vigilants of Stendarr are dead. The entire hall of the Vigilant has been wiped out by vampires, and if you go there, all you'll find are corpses and destructions. Harkon's forces didn't just attack them, they exterminated them. It's one of the only times Skyrim tells you outright, these people lost. There was no grand battle, no heroic last stand, just failure. And Stendarr's Beacon? It's the last vestige of this failed order. A tiny group of survivors clinging to the ruins of their beliefs. They don't fight back, they don't rally a resistance, they just exist. It's strange to call anything in Skyrim forgotten, because for the most part, Bethesda designed the game to be engaging no matter where you go, even in remote locations like an abandoned shack in the woods. These often hold some kind of story, but Stendarr's Beacon doesn't. It's just there. Even its geography makes it feel unimportant. It's off in the corner of the map, sitting awkwardly between Riften and the border of Morrowind. If you're not actively looking for it, you'll probably never find it at all. And even if you do find it, you'll probably never return. Think about it, how many times have you actually visited Stendarr's Beacon in your playthroughs of Skyrim? I'll bet the answer is either once or maybe twice, if you were really trying to 100% the map. But after that, it fades into the background, overshadowed by the countless locations that actually do something. But here's where things get interesting. What if the fact that nothing happens at Stendarr's Beacon actually makes it the most fascinating place in the game? Think about it. Skyrim is a world teeming with adventure. Everywhere you turn, something is demanding your attention. Even the smallest caves or roadside ruins have something. A note, a body, an ambush, something to interact with. The game is meticulously crafted to keep you engaged at all times. And yet, in the middle of all that, Bethesda left a space where nothing happens. A true outpost of nothingness. This could be intentional. Stendar's beacon might be a relic of a different design philosophy. One where not everything needed to have a purpose. It stands as a rare example of restraint in game design, where the developers simply let a place be, rather than turning it into yet another piece of content. Or maybe they just forgot to add anything interesting. Who really knows at this point? In a game filled with grand narratives, maybe Stendar's beacon is meant to be a moment of quiet reflection. The few vigilants who remain, despite knowing they are doomed, still uphold their duty. It presents a rare, almost tragic picture of perseverance. There is something poetic about this last stand that never turns into an actual battle. Maybe we're not supposed to fight here. Maybe for once we are just supposed to observe. In a way, this silence feels intentional. Bethesda gives us countless battles, betrayals, and supernatural horrors throughout Skyrim. But at Stendar's beacon, there is only stillness. The remaining vigilants continue their prayers, seemingly unaware that they have already lost their war. This eerie, contemplative atmosphere forces the player to consider something rare in Skyrim, a battle that has already been lost, with no way to change its outcome. It's a type of storytelling that works precisely because nothing happens. Other locations give you a chance to intervene, to change the fate. Stendar's beacon doesn't. It stands as a reminder that some things in the world, both in fiction and reality, are beyond saving. Perhaps that's why it feels so unsettling. We're so used to Skyrim letting us be the hero, that when we find a place where heroism is meaningless, it stands out. And that makes Stendar's beacon one of the most haunting places in the game. One of the most fascinating things about Stendar's beacon is that its true story isn't told through dialogue, quests, or scripted events. It's something you have to piece together. Skyrim is a game that often hands the player grand narratives, but here Bethesda takes a different approach. Instead of giving you a story, they leave behind the absence of one, forcing you to ask your own questions. Why didn't the vigilants rally after the destruction of their hall? Why don't they seem to acknowledge their inevitable demise? Are they stubbornly holding on to their faith? Or are they just waiting for the end? There are no answers, only the silence of a forgotten outpost. In a way, this makes Stendar's beacon one of the most immersive locations in Skyrim. It doesn't spell anything out for you, and yet its existence tells a story of failure, loss, and quiet resilience. It challenges the player to think beyond the game's mechanics, to consider what happens when a faction that was supposed to protect the world simply ceases to matter. Maybe that's why it feels so eerie. Stendar's beacon is a place where the story has already ended, but the characters just haven't realized it yet. And in a game where the player is always the center of a narrative, finding a place where you don't matter is something truly rare. One of Skyrim's greatest strengths is how its world changes as you play. Cities react to your choices, factions rise and fall, and even the civil war reshapes the land. But Stendar's beacon stands apart because it never changes. No matter how many dragons you slay, how many Daedric princes you defy, or even if you side with the vampires and wipe out the Dawn Guard, the beacon remains the same. Stendar's beacon is the only place in Skyrim where nothing happens. And in a way, that makes it one of the most thought-provoking locations in the game. It's a monument to a faction that failed, a place left behind by a world that has long since moved on. It's a reminder that not everything in a game needs to have purpose, and that sometimes the most interesting places are the ones that don't try to be. So the next time you're wandering through the mountains of Skyrim, take a moment to visit Stendar's beacon. Climb to the top, look out over the land, and appreciate the silence. Because in a world as chaotic as Skyrim, sometimes nothing happening is the most meaningful thing of all. Some places in Skyrim aren't meant to be noticed. They sit off the road, not on it. They glow with no torches. No name hovers over the screen until you're nearly at the doorstep. No quests, no characters of note, but they're still watching you. On the cold coast of East Windhelm, where snow sinks into the sea and the wind forgets to blow, there's a cabin. It's called Trader's Post. and nothing ever happens here, but it exists, and somehow that makes it worse. Trader's Post is a small wooden house built where no one should live. It clings to the edge of Skyrim's northeastern coast, north of Mixwater Mill, southeast of Windhelm, and surrounded by silent falling snow. No road leads to it, no map points you in its direction. And when you finally stumble across it, if you ever do, it doesn't greet you with dialogue or narrative. It doesn't even introduce itself. It just squats there, abandoned and still, like it's trying to forget it was ever built. But someone is there. Bandits live inside, but not many, just 3. As if they can't even be bothered to show up in numbers. There are bear traps laid across the snow outside, carefully arranged, rusted open, some half buried under thin layers of snow. They're not meant for you, well, not specifically, they're just there. Sprung, waiting, forgotten, like someone put them out one night in fear and never came back to check them, or like they've become a ritual, something the bandits do out of habit. Inside there are crates, a bedroll, a few scattered items and some minor loot. No books, no journals, one chest that is almost worth writing home about. No name on the mail, no dreams on the pillow, just a place, just a cabin and just a post. A post for what though? That's the question Skyrim never answers. Trader's Post is a loaded name. It implies betrayal, a hidden history, maybe a secret meeting ground for someone who fled a war, maybe a last stand for someone who changed sides, maybe a forgotten outpost for soldiers who never made it back. But the game never tells you who the traitor was. There are no letters on the table, no burnt flags, no signs of conflict or identity. Just bandits who don't speak and traps that don't matter. The name stands on its own, however, like a ghost of meaning. The kind of name that feels left over from a story they never got written, or one that was erased on purpose. The bandits in Trader's Post are exactly what you expect. Hostile, forgettable, functionally identical to every other trio of low-level thugs in Skyrim. They don't carry unique names, they don't have unique loot, they don't even have a unique formation. One waits outside, one stands on the porch, one paces in the snow. It's as if the game placed them there using a template, just enough to make you draw your sword, but not enough to make you ask why they're there. And maybe that's the point, because these bandits aren't protecting anything. They're not holding down turf, they're not hiding stolen gold or rare treasure. They're just occupying a space that no one else wanted. They're just filling the silence. If you open the map, Trader's Post barely registers. The area east of Windhelm is cold, flat, and mostly devoid of landmarks. No cities, no quests, no Daedric shrines or dragon burials. It's a space in Skyrim that feels like a canvas no one painted on. Even the snow here seems tired. Nearby are a few animals, some sparse tundra plants, and the occasional hunter or a saber cat. But there's no real reason to be here. No faction will send you this way. No courier will deliver a letter with a clue. No NPC will ever say the words Trader's Post out loud. The house just waits, but not for you, and not for anyone else. In-game development, not everything gets to be finished. Some places were meant to host a quest that got cut. Some locations were built for encounters that never got written. And sometimes, things were added to break up travel distance, to fill space, to keep the world from feeling empty. But here's the irony. Trader's Post feels empty anyway. It has bandits, it has traps, it has a name and a location and a geometry. But it doesn't have anything else. It feels like the house itself was forgotten mid-sentence, as if a designer put it in, planning to come back, and never did. Unlike other abandoned homes in Skyrim, places like the Abandoned Shack or the Alchemist's Shack, Trader Post doesn't tell a story through bones or blood. No skeleton slumped over a desk, no journal half-written, no lingering spell effects or strange music cues. Nothing supernatural, nothing emotional, nothing memorable. And that's what makes it feel so uncanny, because the lack of detail here isn't atmospheric, it's unsettling. It's like the house is trying to disappear, like it knows it shouldn't exist, but yet it does. You won't be sent here, not by a Jarl, not by a mage, not by a Daedric prince. There's no side quest that leads you to the front door, no bounty notice that mentions this place. Not even radiant quests, those endlessly repeating objectives will pull you in. If you find this place, you find it alone. And nothing happens when you do. You only get one marker cleared, no dialogue opens, no music plays. You kill the bandits, check the containers, maybe spring a trap, and then you leave. That's it. And the game forgets you were ever there. Skyrim is somewhat of a game of noise. Dragons scream, shouts echoing in mountain passes, quest markers that pull you from cave to cave and city to city. But Trader's Post is quite opposite of that. It is a house defined by its lack of things, a moment on the map where no story happens, a named location that exists purely as a whisper. And like the old Roldan Inn or Pilgrim's Trench, its silence says something. Something about the world, something about forgotten places, and something about people who once mattered and then didn't. Inside the shack at Trader's Post, there's a fire pit. The logs are in place, arranged as if someone meant to build a fire but never struck the flint. And that's the kind of detail that lodges in your memory. Because in Skyrim, fires are everywhere. Lit braziers, roaring hearths, torches in tombs. Warmth is a signal that life is near, but this one is quite cold. And it raises the question you can't answer. Were the bandits squatting here temporarily, waiting to move on? Were they left behind by a bigger gang, forgotten like the cabin itself? Or did someone else once live here, someone who vanished before the flames ever caught? The fire feels symbolic of the whole location, something half finished, something half remembered, half abandoned. Like someone stopped writing mid-page and never picked up the pen again. So the pit sits cold, not because it went out, but because it never burned in the first place. Most homes in Skyrim feel alive. Even abandoned ones hint at memory. Someone once cooked here, someone once fought here, and someone once prayed here. But Trader's Post doesn't. It doesn't remember anything, and it doesn't care that you're here. You can clear it, you can avoid it, you can return 20 levels later and find the same traps, the same nameless bandits, the same snow on the roof. It's not haunted, it's not cursed. It's just empty, a home with a name with no story. The only home in Skyrim where nothing happens. And maybe that's exactly why it stays with you. Skyrim is a world that thrives on momentum. Cities clash over ancient thrones, guilds pull you into webs of political intrigue, and every crypt, cave, and corner seems to contain a secret just waiting to be uncovered. The land is teeming with activity, bursting with possibility, and yet nestled in the snow-covered hills west of Solitude stands a tower so overlooked, so unremarkable, that it feels like the world has simply passed by it. That place is Pinefrost Tower. To call Pinefrost Tower a location almost feels generous. It's not much more than a crumbling ruin sitting on a ridge, staring blankly into the cold northern sky. Most players won't even know it exists. It's not marked on the map until you get really close. No one ever mentions it. No quest points you there. And once you arrive, there's no reward, no confrontation, no narrative breadcrumb to follow. There's just nothing. Some places in Skyrim are forgotten not because of their location, but because of their silence. Last time we explored a lonely outpost in the southeast. A beacon, Stendar's beacon, that stood vigil for a war that never came. This time we travel in the opposite direction, both geographically and spiritually, to another structure that's been abandoned not with fire or blood, but with indifference. When you first spot Pinefrost Tower, it seems to hint at significance. A tall stone structure, partially intact, sits like a lone sentinel over the snowy landscape. It has the air of something meaningful. Maybe a lookout post from the days of Skyrim's early history, a lost military outpost, a secret bandit den. Skyrim trains you to expect something, and so naturally you investigate. But when you reach the top, all you find is a dead bandit, a bedroll, and a chest with some randomized loot and some gold. That's it. No journals, no letters, no ghosts, no traps, no clever puzzles. In a game so dense with content, Pinefrost Tower feels like an absence. It gives you a named location and then offers absolutely nothing to justify the existence. Even the most inconsequential caves in Skyrim often have a bit of flair. A skeleton posed dramatically, a scrawled note, a bit of visual storytelling. But Pinefrost Tower has none of that. It is a place that dares to do nothing at all. Skyrim rarely leaves you alone. Even its silence usually comes with meaning. A barren tundra might lead you to a hunter's cabin. A still lake might conceal a sunken chest. But the tower is one of the only places where the silence is total. The game doesn't try to pull you deeper, it doesn't whisper a story in your ear, it just stands there. This is a place where the world stops speaking to you. There's no music cue, no ambient tension, just wind and snow and stone. You can almost imagine that Bethesda placed it there as kind of a forgotten placeholder, a landmark that was going to matter and then didn't. A tower built for a quest that never got written, or maybe it was never meant to matter. Maybe it was always supposed to be a place that simply exists, and in that way it becomes strangely poetic. If Pinefrost Tower does have a story, it's one you have to invent yourself. Why was the tower built? Who lived here? Was it ever manned by soldiers, or was it always just another waypoint in Skyrim's vast, uncaring wilderness? There's a strange kind of sadness to it. The dead bandit at the top wasn't killed in some epic battle. There was no scorch marks, no arrows, no drama. It looks like they just stopped living one day. Their body, like the tower, is a remnant without a reason. You could imagine them as a fugitive hiding from the law, taking shelter in the ruins only to succumb to the cold or starvation. Maybe they were trying to start a new life out there, away from the chaos of the world. Maybe they were just passing through, but Skyrim evidently gives you nothing. No prompt, no text, no closure. And in doing so, it opens a vacuum your imagination can fill, but only if you choose to, because the game itself does not really care. There's something powerful about a place like Pinefrost Tower. In a game that constantly rewards you with XP, gold, dialogue decisions, Pinefrost Tower offers only a bit of that. It is content without consequence, a landmark without law. And in that sense, it almost feels subversive. Modern games, especially open-world RPGs, are obsessed with making every corner of the map matter. Developers cramming collectibles, quest hooks, Easter eggs, and side stories to make every step feel productive. But here, Pinefrost Tower quietly resists that philosophy. It is one of the few places in Skyrim that trust the player to be okay with not being rewarded. It dares to offer an experience that's purely atmospheric. You reach the summit, look out over the snow-covered peaks, hear the wind howl, and that's it. No fanfare, no deeper meaning, just a moment of stillness in a game obsessed with movement. The only real sense that makes it feel like a place in Skyrim is the 2-leveled frost trolls or ice wraiths that greet you. But even then, that all feels irrelevant. Unlike Skyrim's grand ruins, ancient Nord barrows and Dwemer cities frozen in time, Pinefrost Tower is a modern relic. It doesn't belong to some mythical civilization, it's not tied to the gods or the dragons. It's just a ruin. And that makes it feel weirdly grounded. This is not a ruin of legend, this is a ruin of circumstance. It could have been a military outpost, a bandit lookout, a hunter's retreat. And like so many forgotten places in our own world, it simply fell out of use. Now it decays, ignored, and unimportant. Its stone walls aren't lined with glowing crystals, its secrets are not protected by puzzles. There are no ghosts here, only echoes. This place never changes. No quest sends you back here, no character ever mentions it. It isn't updated or reused in DLC, and once you visit it, it remains exactly as you left it. And that makes it one of the rarest things in all of Skyrim. A place that exists entirely outside the story. You cannot affect it, and it does not affect you. That kind of narrative isolation is rare in games, and even rarer in Skyrim. Almost every other location in the game is connected to something bigger, but Pinefrost Tower feels like a place that exists purely for itself. It doesn't care whether you're the Dragonborn, or a wandering thief, or a lost alchemist. You are irrelevant here, and in that irrelevance, there is some kind of freedom. What Pinefrost Tower truly reveals is the strange luxury of a world that's too large to be entirely known. Skyrim is a curated experience, but it also allows for the possibility of places that fall through the cracks. Pinefrost isn't broken, bugged, or glitched. It's just there. It doesn't tie into any of the game's main systems, it doesn't complete a checklist. And that might be the most honest kind of realism Skyrim offers. Because in the real world, not every ruin has a plaque, not every corpse has a diary. Sometimes things are abandoned and no one remembers why. Sometimes a place just exists, quietly eroding under the snow and time. That's what this tower is, a digital ghost of intention. Maybe half built and half forgotten, it doesn't need you to be there. But the fact that you found it, the fact that you noticed its absence of meaning, makes it meaningful in a completely different way. Pinefrost Tower is a place in Skyrim where nothing happens. And in a world built on chaos, that makes it feel unforgettable. It is a monument to nothingness. A tower without a purpose, a ruin without a story, a location the game itself seems to have forgotten. And maybe that's why it matters. Because in a game where you are always the hero, always the center of the universe, this tower offers something rare. A moment of quiet, a place that asks for nothing of you. A reminder that not every story needs a conflict, and not every place needs a point. Sometimes the most powerful locations are the ones that let you feel small. In a game like Skyrim, it's easy to overlook the quiet people. The world is filled with shouting Nords, storming battle mages, and ancient dragons clawing their way out of time. Cities burn, Jarls scheme, and you, the player, are usually at the center of it all. But if you ever stop sprinting from one quest marker to the next, if you wander off the beaten path, sometimes the world lets you find something else. Something forgotten. And something small. Not magical, not dangerous, just quiet and strange. If you walk through the mountains, you will come across him, in his little shack, isolated in the hills. And that's what might make him the loneliest NPC in all of Skyrim. Froki's shack is exactly what it sounds like. A tiny wooden structure half collapsed and huddled against the cliffs in the southern mountains of Skyrim. It isn't near a road, it isn't near a town, it isn't even on the way to anything really. There's no marker, no reason to come here, just stone, snow and silence. If you do find it, it's probably by accident. Maybe you were scaling the cliffs looking for the Shrine of Talos. Maybe you were chasing a fox through the trees. Maybe, like me, you were just bored of fast travelling and wanted to see what lived in the margins of the map. And then you see it. A shack, a fire, some smoke, a sign that someone actually still lives up here. Froki is an old Nord, grey-haired, worn. He greets you with suspicion, like someone who stopped trusting visitors a long time ago. He wears simple clothes, no armour, no rings. He's not a quest giver in the traditional sense. He doesn't beg for help or praise your accomplishments. He just sits near the fire watching the wind cut through the trees. But if you talk to him, if you really stay for a while, you'll learn that Froki used to be something more. A hunter, a soldier, a worshipper of the old gods. A man who once fought for Skyrim, but who gave up on it a long time ago. He's one of the only living followers of Kine, the ancient goddess of the storm and sky, and he teaches her ways to his grandson, Hamming. But that's right, Froki isn't entirely alone, is he? But it still feels like he is. If you've ever played Skyrim from the start, Hamming might sound familiar. He's one of the first NPCs you ever meet, a child from Helgen who survives the dragon attack at the beginning of the game. You see him escape with his father as the town crumbles. And then nothing. His father disappears, his home is gone, and Hamming is never really mentioned again. Unless, of course, you find this shack, because this is where he ended up, living with his grandfather in the middle of nowhere. No books, no toys, no friends, just a half-burnt shack, some hunting lessons, and the howling wind. Skyrim doesn't tell you what happened to his father. The game doesn't really care. And maybe that's what makes it worse, because it's not just Froki who's lonely, it's the boy too. Two forgotten characters stitched together by absence. And maybe that's why Froki always seems so angry. Froki doesn't like you. Not at first, anyway. He doesn't trust the companions, he doesn't believe in the 9 divines, and he especially doesn't believe in the Empire. To Froki, Skyrim lost its way when it forgot about the old gods, when it traded the wildness of Kine for the bureaucracy of the divines. He sees the modern world as weak, corrupt, disconnected from the land. He speaks in quiet, judgmental tones, not bitter, exactly, just disappointed. It's easy to write him off as another cranky old Nord. But if you listen closely, Froki's anger is grief. He's mourning a Skyrim that no longer exists. A time when men lived in the mountains, prayed to the sky, and didn't need thrones or temples to find meaning. That world is gone, and so Froki left the world with it. Or maybe the world left him. If you earn Froki's respect, usually by showing interest in Kine, he gives you a quest, but not a normal one, no kill this bandit or fetch this artifact. Instead, he tells you to visit Kine's sacred shrines and hunt the guardian spirits that dwell there. It's a simple task: go to another remote hill, fight a ghost animal, and then return. But the journey takes you across the wildest parts of Skyrim. Deep forests, hidden cliffs, forgotten glades. And every time you fight one of Kine's guardians, you realise something. These aren't really evil spirits. They're not threats. They're sacred. They're symbols of the natural world, proud, powerful, and ancient. You're not killing monsters. You're proving that you understand them. And when you return to Froki, he doesn't cheer. He just nods. Like you've finally learned something he's known for decades. Talking about Froki's home, it isn't cozy. The walls are crooked, the floor is cracked, there's no food on the table, no clutter, no warmth. There are almost no visitors except for myself and other players. No signs of trade, no books, no notes, no letters. Froki doesn't even have 2 beds, one for him and one for his grandson. So I'm assuming they sleep in the one bed. But maybe Froki's shack wasn't meant to last. Maybe it was meant to be temporary, a place of exile, or pilgrimage, or mourning. But years passed, and the world didn't ask for him to return. So he didn't. That's the question that lingers long after you leave. Did Froki really choose this? Did he walk away from civilization because he believed in something greater? A forgotten god? A purer way of life? Or did he lose everything and build his life out of the ruins? We'll never really know, will we? Skyrim doesn't really give us any answer to this. Froki doesn't have a good backstory quest, or a personal journal, or a friend who speaks about him in town. He is utterly and completely disconnected from the rest of the game. And in a world where everything is usually tied together, from Daedric cults to court intrigues, that kind of disconnection is rare, because it almost feels real. People like Froki exist. People who lose faith in the world, who retreat, who vanish into the hills. Not because they hate people, but because they've been hurt by them too many times. Froki's not a villain. He's not even a hermit. He's just tired. Froki doesn't die in a grand battle. He doesn't leave behind a powerful weapon or a buried secret. When the game ends, he's still there. Still sitting by the fire, still raising a boy who lost his home. Still praying to a god no one remembers. And maybe that's what makes him the loneliest NPC in Skyrim. Not because he's alone, but because he's untouched. and unclaimed by any major questline, any war, and any epic conclusion. He exists entirely outside the game's design, which means Froki isn't really here for the player. He's here for himself. Froki's shack isn't a dungeon. It's not a shrine. It's not even marked on most maps. It's just a shack, a house, in the mountains, slowly decaying under the snow. But it holds something that most places in Skyrim don't. Stillness. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of grief, of memory and of choice. Because Froki isn't a forgotten character. He's a character who chose to forget the world. And somehow, that's kind of more haunting. The wind never stops blowing around his home, the fire never quite warms the room, and the boy, Hamming, never says much of anything. But they're there, together, waiting for something that probably won't come. Maybe kind, maybe peace, maybe nothing. And as you leave Froki's shack and the snow begins to swallow the roof behind you, you might realise you weren't really meant to find him. But now that you have, you won't forget him. There are ruins across Skyrim, broken forts, fallen watchtowers, crumbling gnawed barrows. But few carry the same quiet tragedy as Fort Snowhawk. Situated between Morthal and the western marshes, it's easy to miss. Its walls are half swallowed by swamp fog and time. At first glance, it's just another military ruin, occupied by bandits or necromancers depending on when the player stumbles upon it. But beneath those stone walls lies something older and far stranger. The ghost of a city that once stood here, one of Skyrim's forgotten settlements. In the Elder Scrolls arena, Snowhawk was no mere outpost. It was a full city, bustling, walled and proud, a stronghold in the Reach before the world forgot it. Yet by the time of Skyrim, 2 eras later, the city has vanished entirely, its name preserved only in the decaying ruin of a fort. No citizens remain, no merchants, no guards, not even a single house. This is the story of the city that disappeared, and of the fort that remains to remember it. Fort Snowhawk sits in a desolate patch of Yarlmarch, a region dominated by mist, mud and decay. To its east lies Morthal, one of Skyrim's smallest and eeriest towns, itself built on a swampland and half-forgotten legends. To the west rise the jagged peaks that border the Reach. Between them stands the fort, crumbling and silent. Its placement is strategic, but odd. The fort commands no road, guards no mine, and overlooks no trade route. Most forts in Skyrim serve a clear purpose. Fort Amol near Windhelm protects the road to Eastmarch, while Fort Greenwall guards the Rift's northern border. But Snowhawk? It watched over nothing. It's isolated, sunken into marshland that seems to devour it year by year. And that's what makes it so unsettling. The landscape itself feels complicit in its disappearance, as though the earth wanted to erase it. The mist rises, the grass grows over the stone, and what was once a proud city fades into something no one remembers. To understand the curiosity of Fort Snowhawk, you must return to the Elder Scrolls arena. In that game, the very first in the series, Snowhawk was a functioning city-state, one of several regional powers within Skyrim. Alongside Winterhold, Falkreath and Solitude, it stood as a bastion of civilization in the wild north. Its ruler, the King of Snowhawk, governed from sturdy walls, and its people were as hardy as any in the province. But by the 4th era, the name survives only as an echo. The city has fallen off maps, absent even from the mouths of Skyrim's oldest historians. No one in Morthal mentions it, no bard sings of it. It is as though the world itself decided to forget. This disappearance isn't unique in Tamrielic history. Empires rise and fall constantly. But Snowhawk's erasure feels deliberate. Cities decay, yes, they do all the time. But names persist. The ruins of Helgen remain on the lips of travellers. The ghosts of Labyrinthian are remembered by mages, and even Sarthal, destroyed thousands of years ago, lives on in story. Snowhawk, however, is gone. What could erase a city so thoroughly that even its name becomes just a fort's afterthought? Fort Snowhawk is the only surviving trace, a military ruin that still bears the name of its ancestors. It is a relic built on older bones, likely constructed over the ruins of the original city's walls. Its architecture, however, tells a different story. It is imperial in style, with square battlements, iron gates, and arched corridors. That means it was rebuilt, likely during the late Third Era, after the fall of the actual old Snowhawk. So what stands today is not the city, but a replacement. A fort built to occupy the same ground, perhaps because the land held strategic or symbolic importance. Yet the Imperial engineers could not erase what came before. When you walk through its ruined halls, the layout feels strange. Too sprawling for a simple fort, too enclosed for a city. There's a sense that the stones themselves remember more than they should. And that leads to the central mystery. Why was Snowhawk reduced to this single ruin? And why does no one speak of it anymore? Among fans and lore scholars, several theories attempt to explain Snowhawk's disappearance. None are official, but each feel disturbingly plausible. One theory claims plague, that disease swept through the city, perhaps carried by the swamp waters or brought by travellers from the Reach. The marshland around Fort Snowhawk is known for sickness. Morthal's inhabitants even mention bog fever and strange ailments that take root in damp air. Perhaps the city was abandoned when it became unlivable, its people fleeing before disease claimed them all. Another theory suggests war. The Second Era saw Skyrim torn apart by civil conflicts, and Snowhawk, located between territories claimed by the Reachmen and the Nordic Jarls, may have been a casualty of those wars. Fort Snowhawk's later Imperial reconstruction does support this. It might have been built atop ruins left by some long-forgotten siege. The most haunting theory, however, is magic. Some whisper that Snowhawk fell to necromancy, that its last days were marked by experiments too dangerous to control. And when the Dragonborn explores Fort Snowhawk in Skyrim, it's crawling with necromancers. The air hums with black energy, and corpses line the halls. What if they didn't invade the fort? What if they just returned to it, reclaiming the site of some ancient atrocity? As I've said, when the player first encounters Fort Snowhawk, it is usually under the control of necromancers, a fitting if eerie fate. The halls are filled with robed mages raising skeletons and their rituals through the dark. There is something chillingly appropriate about this occupation. The necromancers bring death to a place already buried by history. But what's more intriguing is the implication that they were drawn here. Skyrim is full of ruins, yet these mages choose Fort Snowhawk. Why? Perhaps because the land itself remembers death. Perhaps the city's fall was not natural, but magical. A blight of sorcery that still taints the soil. The necromancer's presence transforms the fort into a tomb within a tomb. You're not just clearing out bandits, you're disturbing something that was already dead twice over, once as a city and once as a fort. It is as if Snowhawk cannot stop dying. Perhaps the strangest part of Snowhawk's story is not its fall, but its absence from Skyrim's culture. No one remembers it. You can ask scholars, guards, or jarls, no one will speak of its name. Even the College of Winterhold, which preserves ancient records, makes no mention of it. In a world where everything leaves ruins and rumours, Snowhawk leaves silence. This silence is what turns the mystery from historical to existential. Snowhawk wasn't merely destroyed, it was forgotten, and in Tamriel, forgetfulness is kind of a death. When names vanish, spirits fade. When no one remembers, history itself dissolves. One might imagine that Snowhawk's ghosts still wander the marshes, watching over the ruined fort, desperate to be remembered, trapped between existence and oblivion. Morthal lies only a short walk from Fort Snowhawk, and its people speak often of strange lights and noises in the marsh. Yet they never mention Snowhawk at all. It's as though an unspoken agreement keeps them from acknowledging it. Some players theorise that Morthal itself may have been born from Snowhawk survivors, those few who fled the city before it fell and resettled nearby on safer ground. It would explain the town's reclusive nature, its fascination with the dead, and its deep-rooted mistrust of outsiders. Even the town's Jarl, Ravencrone, speaks like a woman haunted by memories she doesn't fully understand. If that theory is true, then Morthal isn't merely a strange swamp town. It's the shadow of a tragedy, a remnant of a city that used to be. The ruins of Fort Snowhawk still stand, lonely and unremarked on, visited only by adventurers on their way to Morthal or soldiers sent to die for a war they barely understand. Yet beneath its foundations lies the memory of something greater, a city erased by time, a name nearly lost. Snowhawk once stood as a proud city-state, a beacon in the Reach. Now it exists only as whispers in fan theories and the faint hum of necromantic rituals echoing through the broken halls. It is a city that lives only in absence, the missing city of Skyrim. And in that absence lies its strange immortality. For though no one remembers Snowhawk, the mystery of its vanishing ensures it will never be completely forgotten again. Skyrim is a land that constantly tries to grab your attention. Dragons circle overhead, cities tower over the tundra, ancient ruins promise treasure and danger beneath every mountain. But sometimes the most interesting places in Skyrim are the ones that don't truly stand out. They blend into the landscape, they look ordinary, they quietly wait for someone curious enough to notice. One of the best examples of this is Pine Watch. At first glance, Pine Watch is nothing more than a small shack, sitting peacefully in the forests of the Falkreath Hold. It looks like dozens of other cabins scattered across Skyrim's wilderness, a place where a lone hunter might live quietly, far away from the chaos of the cities. Most players ride past it without a second thought, but beneath that unremarkable little house lies one of Skyrim's most surprising secrets, a hidden criminal operation, an underground hideout, and a quiet connection to the powerful Thieves' Guild of Riften. Pine Watch may look forgettable, but that is exactly the point. Pine Watch sits just west of Helgen and north of the road that winds to Falkreath. The surrounding forest is dense and quiet, filled with towering pines and the distant sounds of wildlife. In other words, it's the perfect place for a secluded home. When you first arrive, the shack seems completely normal. The cabin contains the typical items you might expect: a bed, a table, a cooking pot, and a few scattered belongings. Nothing about it screams danger. Nothing suggests hidden tunnels or criminal conspiracies. And that is exactly why Pine Watch works so well. Because Skyrim is full of shacks like this. Hunter cabins, abandoned houses, small farms. They are everywhere. Players become accustomed to them and stop questioning what might be hidden inside. Pine Watch relies on that assumption. It disguises itself as something mundane in a world where players have learned to ignore the mundane itself. The true nature of Pine Watch reveals itself only if the player begins to explore more carefully. Hidden within the shack is a concealed passage leading underground. Behind the innocent-looking cabin lies Pine Watch Bandit's Sanctuary, a sprawling hideout filled with criminals, traps, and stolen goods. Suddenly, the quiet cabin transforms itself into something much more sinister. What looked like a peaceful home is actually the entrance to an entire underground operation. Bandits move through the tunnels below, guarding treasure and maintaining a secret base far away from the eyes of Skyrim's authorities. It's a clever twist. Many Skyrim dungeons begin with dramatic ruins or imposing caves. Pine Watch begins with a humble wooden door and a small chimney puffing smoke into the forest air. It doesn't look like an entrance to anything important. which is exactly why no one suspects it. The importance of Pine Watch becomes clearer during the Thieves Guild questline, particularly the quest Silver Lining. During this mission, the player is sent to recover a valuable silver mold from Pine Watch, revealing that the hideout is connected to criminal networks operating across Skyrim. This small shack in the forest is not just a random bandit camp. It is part of a much larger system. The Thieves Guild, despite being headquartered in Riften far to the east, maintains influence throughout the province. Pine Watch acts as one of their quiet outposts, a place where stolen goods can be hidden, guarded, and moved without attracting attention. In other words, Pine Watch is a piece of Skyrim's underground economy. And yet, if you never join the Thieves Guild, you might never learn that at all. At the centre of Pine Watch's operation is Regal Strongarm, the woman who lives in the shack above. At first, she seems harmless, just another NPC occupying a remote cabin. But if you venture deeper into the sanctuary below, her true identity becomes clear. Regal is the leader of the bandits operating beneath Pine Watch. The peaceful resident upstairs is actually the mastermind of the entire hideout. This dual identity adds an extra layer of intrigue to the location. Regal's role perfectly reflects Pine Watch itself, an ordinary surface hiding something much darker below. She lives above ground, maintaining the illusion of a simple life, while commanding a network of criminals beneath the forest floor. It's a quiet deception, one that mirrors the subtle storytelling Bethesda often hides within Skyrim's world. What makes Pine Watch particularly impressive is the scale of what lies beneath it. The underground sanctuary is far larger than the small shack above suggests. It contains multiple chambers, living areas, and defensive positions filled with bandits guarding their territory. Traps line the corridors, enemies patrol the halls, loot is scattered throughout the rooms. It feels like a full dungeon, one that players would normally expect to find beneath an ancient ruin or a massive cave entrance. Instead, it's hidden under a single wooden cabin. That contrast is what makes this place so memorable for the players who actually discover it. The realization that something so large could exist beneath something so small creates a sense of wonder, and perhaps a little paranoia about what else might be hidden across Skyrim. Pine Watch's location in the Falkreath Hold is also significant. Falkreath is known for its forests, its graveyard, and its quiet atmosphere. Compared to cities like Markarth or Windhelm, it feels calm and remote. But that calm hides many secrets. Bandit camps dot the surrounding woods. Necromancers experiment in hidden caves. Dark Brotherhood assassins once operated nearby. Pine Watch fits perfectly into this landscape of hidden danger. It reflects the idea that Falkreath's forests are not as peaceful as they seem. Beneath the trees and mist lie criminals, conspiracies, and forgotten stories waiting to be uncovered. The shack at Pine Watch is simply one more secret buried in the woods. Despite its hidden complexity, Pine Watch remains one of the most unnoticed locations in Skyrim. There are several reasons for this. First, it lacks visual spectacle. There are no towering ruins or dramatic landmarks drawing players towards it. Second, it sits in a forested area that players often pass through quickly while travelling between cities. Thirdly, its entrance looks identical to dozens of other cabins scattered across the province. Players become conditioned to expect nothing special from these small buildings. After exploring a few hunter cabins and finding nothing interesting, they stop checking. Pine Watch takes advantage of that habit. It hides its secrets in plain sight. One of Skyrim's greatest strengths is its use of environmental storytelling, the ability to tell stories through locations rather than dialogue. Pine Watch is a perfect example of this. The shack above tells one story, a quiet life in the woods. The sanctuary below tells another, a network of bandits living and working together in secret. By combining these two layers, the game creates a subtle narrative without needing long conversations or expositions. Players who only glance at the shack see nothing unusual. Players who explore deeper uncover an entire hidden world. This layered design rewards curiosity, a key theme throughout Skyrim's exploration. Skyrim is often remembered for its grand moments, dragon battles, ancient prophecies, and epic quests. But the world's true magic lies in its quiet discoveries. A forgotten campsite, a hidden cave, or a simple wooden shack in the forest that turns out to be something far more dangerous than it appears. Pine Watch reminds us that exploration is not just about chasing markers on a map. It's about curiosity. It's about stepping inside the unremarkable cabin and wondering what might be hidden behind the walls. Because sometimes the most unnoticeable place in all of Skyrim is hiding the biggest secret of all. And Pine Watch has been keeping its secret for a very long time. What makes these places so strange isn't that they're empty, it's that Skyrim usually isn't. The world is built around constant movement, constant discovery, always trying to pull your attention toward the next fight, the next quest, and the next piece of lore. So when you finally find a place where all of that stops, it stands out immediately. These locations feel disconnected from the normal rhythm of the game, not abandoned, not unfinished, just quiet in a way Skyrim rarely allows itself to be. Places where ruins repeat, where nothing changes, and where the world seems content to simply sit still. And oddly enough, that can feel more unsettling than danger, because in a game where something is always supposed to happen, silence starts to feel unnatural, like you've stepped outside the world for a moment and found a corner Skyrim forgot to fill with chaos. And that's what makes these places memorable. Not what's there, but what isn't.